Hello, I'm Sam Winwright, Dental Product Manager at Formlabs. In this video, I'm going to show you the best practices for 3D printing on the Form 2 orthodontic and diagnostic models. These techniques were a result of the dental team here printing and scanning models, different types of models in different orientations with different supports, and we determined these three techniques are really fill in the blanks for productive reasons and also maintain accuracy and ease of use. Before I start talking about these techniques, I want to make sure I'm going to be using some words that I want to make sure everybody's on the same page. Really simply, in preform, this is the build plate or the platform. If your preform looks different than this, upgrade to preform 3 and it'll be easier to follow along, although generally it is similar. This is a build platform in physical reality with some parts printed on it. Again, build plate or build platform. When a model is on the build plate, this is what it looks like. So the model is all the way down, and I'll be going into specifics on exactly how to optimize that. And in the support area of preform, you can see on build platform is selected, and that will prevent it from adding supports and lifting the model. Again, on build platform. Second is, this is what we refer to as a raft. A raft is the support structure under a part or a model, and instead of on build platform being selected here, it is deselected, and for raft type, raft is selected. And that is a few of the techniques we're going to be using as well. Again, I'll get into it a little bit later. And then so with this is the side of the build plate and three models in the three orientations that I'm going to be talking about and getting into a little bit deeper into. So the red line is the build platform. The left model is it flat on the build platform. The middle model is flat or horizontal to the build platform but rafted, but you can see it's still parallel or horizontal to the build platform. And then lastly, this is a model vertical or at an angle up from the build platform. And when I talk about like the degrees or the angles, it's typically from the build platform up will be your degrees. So you can see here with this protractor, we're about 75 to 80 degrees vertical right here. Okay, with that being said, there are the three best techniques for diagnostic orthodontic models and general models on the Form 3 are flat to the build platform, flat or horizontal to the build platform but on a raft, and then vertically at 75 to 85 degrees ish. And there are pros and cons to all three, and really reasons to use all three. That's why we're including three. First, flat to the build plate. It is, in our testing, the best accuracy and the best sort of consistency, which is fantastic, right? It has the lowest resin usage because it's as low as it can possibly be. It doesn't have any supports or any extraneous parts like that. And it's also the fastest print times because it's the lowest it can possibly be, and it doesn't have supports again. Some of the cons, it's difficult to remove from the build platform. If you've ever removed a part printed flat to the build platform, it's hard to get off. I've broken a ton being in a rush. But you know, a paint scraper works very, very well. I'll probably make some more content around what we recommend specifically for that, not for this video. And then lastly, risks of cupping on hollow models. And I have a section at the end that talks specifically about cupping and how to prevent it. And so I'll take you through right now how to print flat to the build plate very easily. So I've just dragged my model in here or imported it. And I take the orientate tool, which is on the left here, and really simply we do select base, and you just click the bottom of the model. And this ensures that the model is totally flat and flush with the build plate. If you were to try to orientate it with the rotation tool, it's really, really hard to do it, so this tool is extremely useful. And then the last step is optional, but if you have a model that has a cervical margin really close to the build plate, and you're at all worried about it maybe not coming out correctly, a really easy thing to do is click on build platform, auto generate selected, and what that does is it adds a little bit of a buffer on the bottom. We call it a Z compensation correction. And so it adds about 0.5 millimeter to 3/4 millimeter of buffer on the bottom, and that gives you a little bit more wiggle room. And so if there is a little bit of in the first couple layers of printing, it compensates for it. But as you can see, it's added some supports We don't want supports on these models. There's nothing overhanging or of concern here. So I'll click on the edit button, and you can individually click these off with the left click, but what I like to do is I left click and drag over my model, and it selects all the supports that you can visibly see. Rotate around, get these other ones, and then you're good to go. And you can do like a bunch of models all at one time like this and edit them all at one time, so you can select everything all at once. It makes it super quick. Apply that, and then you can see we have no supports in critical areas or anything like that, and it has the Z compensation applied. So moving on, number 2, horizontal to the build plate on a raft. So horizontal on a raft. So the pros is a very good accuracy, very almost the same as flat to the build plate. Easy to remove from the build platform. If anybody's used rafts on our printer before, they pop right off. Super nice, super easy. Works with hollow models, so no risk of suction cupping, and it's consistent and easy. I think if I had somebody on my team that was a little less technical, this is the technique I would have them run with every time. It's really easy to do. Accuracy, it's good. Some of the cons: resin usage is a bit up because we have the raft to print and some of the supports, and support removal. So the base of the model won't be perfectly flat because it will have a bunch of supports on it. So one technique I really like is after UV curing models, using a model trimmer really quickly. Takes off and finishes the bottom super quick. I know a lot of people don't have model trimmers sometimes, but if you do, that's really nice. But it can leave a bit of a dimpled effect on the bottom. And if this is a presentation piece, or say if you're a lab providing these models to doctors and you want it to be the best possible, it's a concern, right? So very easily how to add a raft to a model is, let's start from the beginning. So let's just say your model comes in like this. Again, like flat to the build plate, I'm in orientate and select base, so to make sure it's flat, snap down. And then in the support menu here on the left, instead of being on the build platform, click that off and make sure rafts are selected. And that's pretty much it. The optional step here is under advanced settings. Height above raft defaults in at 5 millimeters, but you can lower that to 2 to 3 millimeters. And what that does is, from the base of the raft to the base of the model, that's the height. And obviously reducing that will reduce print times and reduce resin consumption of hair. So I'll go right in between 2 and 3 millimeters at 2.5, apply selected. And very similar to printing flat on the build plate, I just want to confirm that there are no supports on critical areas like the anatomy, cervical margin, or anything like that. So as soon as this is done, I'll just go in and edit like so. So I'm going to hit the edit button, and I'm just going to make sure there's nothing in critical areas. Actually, this looks really good. There's no there's a little bit here. I mean, these are generally okay. You know, if I was making a retainer over here, I'd trim to there, but you can left click them off, or again click and drag and select all the points at once and delete it. This is now good to go. This part has a lowered raft, horizontal to the build plate, and ready to print. And next is, third and final, a vertical model on a raft. And so in our testing, the raft really added a lot of accuracy. So we always recommend rafts. It's the most models possible in printing, and it's easy to remove from the build platform because of the raft, and it works on hollow models. This is really an ideal setup for overnight prints. I usually recommend that people do, you know, in the middle of the day prints flat to the build plate or on a raft, you know, for small batches, and then at night, and you want to get a ton of production out of it, load this thing up with vertical models, and you know, it doesn't matter if it's taking 3 hours or 8 hours. You know, you're at home eating dinner and all those things while it prints. So timing is not such an issue, and this is really ideal for overnight prints. Some of the cons: the resin usage is a little bit higher because the supports are longer, not by much. Support removal, similar to rafted horizontal, you know, the supports will need to be snapped off and removed. And if you want it to be a nice finished presentation piece, you might need to do some trimming on the model trimmer or with your hand piece. Longest print time, which again, I wouldn't do it during the day, so maybe not such a huge concern. And it is the most technical nesting. I think out of all three of these, this is the hardest to do. Not difficult, but probably not for a beginner. I would start with flat and move your way up. And so here's my file again. So I'm just going to clear my supports, and let's just say it came in like this or something. So what I like to do is I'll actually sort of get it generally where I want it. So this sphere rotates our parts, right? And I'll make sure these two, the posterior area is, it doesn't have to be perfectly flat down to the bottom. Pretty close is good enough. And then I'll look from the top actually, and I want to rotate it so we can set up, if you could imagine, two lines of models, say if you want to do a full batch. And the nice thing about aligning it like this is you can click on this view arrow one more time, and you can see its angle now perfect in this set view. And I had mentioned 75 to 85 degrees. You can print these completely 90 degrees straight up, but one of the issues is if any of this anatomy is actually really ideal for completely straight up printing, but if you have any overhanging angles and they're not properly supported, you can start to get some sort of variation in that area of the print. And so really, if you want it to be accurate, you have to support those parts, and I don't really like adding or removing supports on anatomy. It's just not something I like to do. So to save me some of that effort, I'm going to snap back down to the side view by clicking these arrows. I just lean it back a hair. So we're around 75 to 85 degrees, and now we are ready to set up our supports. And there's a couple settings that we have sort of made up to make this as easy as possible. I bump up the density to 1.5. I think it comes in default at 1. This number higher will create more. And 3D printing is really all based on the foundation, or the initial start. The better the foundation, the more accurate, the more consistent, and the less failures you'll have. So I bump up the density to 1.5, from 1 to 1.5. The touch point size, I bump up a hair from 1.7 to 0.8, and I'll put these numbers in the description of the video. And then I change the slope modifier. I think it comes in around 2 as default, down to 1.25, and this prevents it from being on sort of areas that we don't want. And then similar to the last technique, horizontal build plate, I change the height above Raft from 5 down to 2.5 or thereabouts. And now we're good. So with those settings in mind, and again, to get to advanced settings, you just caret this down and it opens it up. Hit auto generate, and this is another step where we want to edit the supports and make sure they're on no critical parts of the model. And so as soon as this is done generating, I will go in and edit and remove it from the areas we don't want it. So I just hit edit. I will get all the supports that I don't want there. So like those, now they're highlighted in blue. Rotate around, get these guys off there. And then this last, this other quadrant over on this side, that looks good. Just rotate around. And if you're ever concerned that maybe there isn't enough supports in an area, don't be afraid to just add some if you need it. The more supports, the more accurate it's going to be. And if you can create a couple supports in a non-critical area, why not? Like if I was being really overdoing it, I could add some here. And again, it's like building a house. The better the foundation, the more accurate the print will come out, and it will reduce your failure rates. Guarantee it. So you don't have to kill it though. Really, those supports I just added were extra. If you follow the other couple techniques I mentioned, just remove the supports from the critical areas, and you're generally good to go. So as you can see here, we now have our model supported and rafted. We're good to go. And just to show you, if you duplicate this, rafts can actually overlap too. So as long as the model's not in red, this is good to go, and we have a little bit of overlap, and you can see you can get these really, really tight. So you can fit quite a few on here, maybe 5 to 6 plus, and you can have 2 rows of them as well. So you can fit quite a bunch of models all at once, and this would be good to go. And yep, so that's vertical on Raft. Last point I'll make in this video is flat to build plate has risks of cupping on hollow models. What does that mean? So the models I've been showing in this video are solid, or they're solid parts. They don't have any hollow features to it. but some parts have hollow features, and what happens is as it prints, it almost draws like a cup, like a suction cup or a plunger. It gets stuck when it's printing, and when the build plate lifts off, it pops up and can delaminate layers, so you can start to see layers getting off registration, or your Z height can be inaccurate because it's peeling and then maybe it doesn't go down, or it sort of leaves air because it's ripped off the part. It's just a bad situation, and sometimes you can't even tell, which is even worse. So to prevent that, in preform, in the printability window, you can show cups. The software will warn you if there is a cup detected. You can see here a horseshoe arch and a palatal model here. Both of these are hollow and they have no way for air to get under. And really the easiest fix here is to take your model, snap down to the build plate, and literally just add a raft to it. So the same technique I was showing earlier in the second technique, just change it from flat to the build plate to raft and auto-generate. And what that does is it allows air through those supports, so it doesn't have any sort of resistance as it peels every layer. And the Form 3, it hasn't been fully tested yet, but the Form 3 might not suffer from cupping because the way it peels in localized areas, it might allow air as it moves across, but we need to do some testing to confirm that. So at this point, just assume cupping is a problem. And there's also another technique to solve cupping, but I'll probably show that in another video in a detailed sort of overview on cupping and how to prevent it. But just add a raft, really simple, done. And as you can see here on the printability dialog on the right, everything is now thumbs up and we're good to go. So that is best practices for printing orthodontic and diagnostic models on the Form 2 printer and probably the Form 3. Many of these concepts are actually consistent across all 3D printing for the most part, although there are slight differences. But I hope this was helpful, and please, if you guys have any questions, you can always send an email to dental@formlabs.com, and you'll get me and the rest of the team. And thank you everybody at Formlabs for putting all the data and the science together to make this possible. Bye-bye.